I would love to learn more about recovery, how many rest days are optimal. On rest days, how active can we be before it's no longer considered a rest day? We'll be talking about this and so much more.
This episode is going to be another Q&A. Let's dive right in.
So, touching on the rest day question. So, how many rest days should we be taking per week? And how do we classify like doing movement on a rest day and letting that be a true rest day versus like an active rest day? And how much is too much when it comes to a rest day? So, I think our views have, at least mine, have shifted a little bit on this over the years. Like, we used to be very strict about with our clients and just what we preached about. Okay, you need one rest day per week at least, often two, and it was a true like rest day. And I remember even us, like, we would just not do anything on a rest day. And with just the state of the world and knowing most people are not even coming close to meeting exercise guidelines, so like the minimum amounts you should be doing, I really think that most people don't need as much rest as we should be telling them that they need. I think most people are sitting majority of their day. They probably don't need to take 2 full rest days and spend the entire day on the couch. Like, that's not ideal. That is not beneficial. That is not helpful when it comes to making progress and just your overall health. So how many rest days you need really does depend on what your lifestyle looks like and what your training looks like, what your training volume looks like, how well you're recovering. All of those factors go into play. But I would say most people are going to benefit from 1 to 2 rest days per week. I think that part is still true. But what you do on those rest days doesn't have to be just sitting on your butt all day. Like, go out for a hike, go out for walks. Move your body, do some light mobility work. And maybe you differ here, but for me, what signifies it as a true rest day versus like, oh, I'm doing way too much, this is no longer an actual rest day, is it a programmed session? So if it's something intentional where you're getting your heart rate up really high, or you're following a program and doing like a programmed workout, then yeah, you're not going to count that as a rest day. But if you go out for a leisurely hike with your family or a couple walks with your family throughout the day, that still to me is a rest day. And that's really why we have movement as a separate pillar compared to just training as part of our 5 pillars.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it needs to be a programmed session, but let's say you end up strolling down to the park, there's a pickup basketball game going, and you go for 60 minutes, 90 minutes up and down the court, heart rate is spiked. That would count as an actual training day. Like, your heart rate is elevated for a sustained period of time. If you're dicking around, you play a couple games, go home, that probably doesn't count towards, a non-rest day. So any type of activity where it's, again, heart rate elevated, extended period of time, that wouldn't really go towards the rest days. As far as general movement, it's definitely a hot topic right now as far as, is walking an exercise? And that really, it's no longer black and white as everyone else makes it seem. Oh, yes, it is. No, it's not. It really depends on where you're at. For some people, walking is going to elevate your heart rate. It's going to count as a form of exercise. We just, generally consider it movement. It's great for, small amounts of calories burned, neat. It's great for very efficient fat loss. Definitely keeps you in a fat loss range. So if you're walking a lot, yeah, it can definitely move towards those goals. If you want to call it an exercise or not, I'm not going to argue with you. But the degree of difficulty is going to determine, and the degree of, quantity, how far you're going, will determine if that really was a true rest day. So if you walk 30,000 steps, even though you're walking, yeah, that's probably still not a rest day. You're probably going to need to recover from that, depending on where you are at physically. So, general movement, if you're getting 10, 12,000 steps, but you're not elevating your heart rate for a sustained period, yeah, that's still a rest day. You can go for a short hike. Your heart rate's not spiking up. We'll count that as an active recovery day. So it really comes down to how are you recovering? And those are things that you'll kind of take into account over time. When you get into this routine, you settle into this routine for a while, you go a few months, you notice when you hit a certain threshold, hey, I need a little extra recovery time. So maybe what you did the previous day does fall into a category of a non-rest day. So again, there's no black and white with anything. Just pay attention, take notes, figure out how you recover after certain things. Do you recover better over time? Can you manipulate overall activity on those active rest days if you're really enjoying it and you want to keep it up? It just depends on you as an individual, but those are some general guidelines.
Yeah, and the question that comes up with this one a lot is, well, how do I know if I'm overtraining? And I think it's personally very hard to be overtraining. The issue with that is really the inverse, is that people are doing too much and then under fueling. They're not fueling enough with enough calories, with enough of the right foods to support their training. So if you're at the point where you're doing a lot and you're training 6 days per week and you're taking an active rest day, and you notice you're not making progress, or progress has stalled majorly, you feel fatigued, your energy levels are in the tank, you're not sleeping great, like you just feel crappy in a few areas, then you probably need to eat more food. It's not necessarily that you have to scale back with what you're doing. You just need to eat to support what you're doing. So I'm more of the camp, like, the more you want to do with training, great. Just make sure you're sleeping well, fueling enough, and really prioritizing that recovery. And when we talk about recovery, we're not talking about doing your foam rolling and jumping in the ice bath and all that. Like, can those things help? Sure. But the top king and queen of recovery are sleep and food. So if you're not hitting those marks in those areas, you're probably not going to be making the progress that you want to see. All right, next question. I'm torn between a mini cut before trying to increase my macros to add some muscle heading into the fall and winter. How do I know if I should cut or remain at maintenance? Is there a certain look? Is there a certain body fat percentage? Like, what's the threshold there?
So I actually just sent out an email. If you guys are not on our daily email list, get on it, because this is just free tidbits that come through every single day. There's a weekly if you don't want them all the time, and then I have a daily, which is if you guys were listening to the morning meeting for a while, we had a couple months where it was a quick 3-minute podcast. This is essentially what that is with that daily email blast. So we just covered this one, and this is something that I even talked about. It was our last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, where a lot of us are in this ping pong game. We want to cut in bulk and cut in bulk and cut in bulk. We don't spend a ton of time at maintenance. So the past, 6 months now, I haven't been tracking. I've been eating around maintenance, just focusing on whole foods, and just trying to kill it in the gym. So rather than trying to get really lean and then bulk up and then cut that back down to have a net improvement of like 0.5% in my physique, I've been doing this long-term gaintaining phase where I just want to get stronger. If I gain a little weight very slowly, cool, but my performance has been through the roof. I'm getting leaner, I'm getting more vascular, I'm getting a lot stronger, a lot faster, and I feel like this is something that'd be very beneficial to a lot of you who are in this in-between phase. If you're not sure if you should cut or bulk or stay at maintenance, you can probably do, I won't say it's the best of both worlds or the best of all worlds, in the idea that it will be the most efficient progress or the fastest progress to change your look. But if you're not sure based on your look, then a long-term gaintaining method might be for you. So focus on eating, and the biggest component here, or one of the top 3 anyway, is primarily nutrient-dense whole foods, which is what we talk about all the time anyway, but it's very important, especially in a gaintaining phase. So you're not retaining this water weight, you're not slowly eating more than you actually think you are, you're at true maintenance. So if you're primarily consuming those whole foods, killing it in the gym, and I don't mean like you're just going really strong, really heavy, but you're actually seeing progress, like you're getting stronger week over week, month over month, your body composition is going to improve. If you maintain your current body fat levels and increase muscle, by definition, your body composition has improved. Your body fat percentage has dropped without cutting calories. So some of you will need to lose weight. You will need to go through a fat loss phase. Some of you will have the ability to focus on specifically gaining muscle and bulking up. For those of you who are in this in-between phase where you're not really sure if you should cut, if you should bulk, you probably want to go for the maintenance, long-term maintenance, and just kill it in the gym. And, to kind of circle back to, well, how specific do I need to be? Do I need to work with a coach during this time? You don't need to work with a coach. It can be very beneficial. People overlook the benefits of working with a coach through maintenance. So that's something we kind of talk about a lot. But again, this is almost more important to be consistent in this type of phase and to be doing all the right things, because the margin for error is so small. If you're in a slight surplus, or if you're not programming correctly to see progress in the gym, I don't want to say you're wasting time because you're at maintenance, but the progress you thought you were making towards the specific goal will be thrown off extremely quickly. So you need to be fine-tuned, you need to be dialed in and killing it on all phases to get the most out of this type of concept.
Yeah, maintenance is very misunderstood. I think people think maintenance and they think everything is maintaining, or like it's a break from the more strict phases, which, yeah, sure, it can be. But the only thing that's really maintaining is like what you're consuming and the type of programming that you're doing. Your body doesn't have to maintain through maintenance, if that makes any sense. But when we say maintenance, it's referring more to your diet and your training. Threshold. So it's not you're stuck at wherever you're at for whatever. Like, you can still make so much progress in so many areas in maintenance. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I think people have a skewed perception of what maintenance is.
And I'll even go as far as to say, if not most, a significant number of our clients see their best progress in a maintenance phase. They see their best improvements in body composition within a 3 to 5 pound range.
Because that's usually the first time for a lot of them, especially we work with mostly females, but that's the first time a lot of our female clients are actually fueling enough to support their training. So their training they're blasting that through the roof. They're performing really well, whether it's with running or, whatever their preferred method is. They're crushing it and they feel good. And that just being able to fuel your body well will propel you to that next level. Just taking that break from the constant dieting and the constant deficit and the constant of trying to be less. It's such a magical thing, and I wish more people were excited about doing it.
And that's why biofeedback is so important. We just talked about this answering the last question. How do you feel in regards to recovery? Sleep, stress, soreness, energy levels, hunger levels throughout the day. Those are things we're measuring with our clients that allow us to determine progress overall. And a lot of times we could go blindfolded on the progress pictures and on weight and focus specifically on biofeedback. And that'll tell us the longer term trend of how well a client is adapting.
Next question. How do I figure out my running form? I have been running for years and I still just shuffle my feet and slog on. It's very slow and efficient, but I don't really know what to do. So this is a very common question. And something that I learned is, I'm going to give you 3 key things I want you to focus on, but something that I learned more recently is that there really is no optimal running form. Like, they did a study, I believe, and they looked at running form, and they had people who kind of just focused on running like whatever their natural form was, like not thinking about it too much. And then they had other people like try to actively like improve their form, and the benefit to performance was like so not even worth anything. So it's almost at a detriment when you try to change things too much, because you're overthinking things. You're asking your body to do something that doesn't feel very natural for you. So for everybody listening, your perfect running form is going to be slightly different than the next person's perfect running form. We all have different mechanics and, whatever. So keep that in mind. But with that said, there are a few things that you can focus on to maybe improve it a little bit if it really is in an inefficient place. And that comes down to stride length, your body positioning, so your forward lean, and then your arm swing. So those are really the 3 most important things. And with stride length, the first thing, or the most common thing that we see, is people who strike the ground with their heel first. That typically means you're overstriding. So you want your foot to land under your body, or as close to under your body as possible. And if you're leading with your heel, that means you're kind of landing in front of your body, which is going to at some point cause injury. It's not the most efficient. So how we want to combat that, and something to think about, is landing more of with that midfoot positioning. So a lot of people comment on my form actually when I post like my treadmill runs, because it looks like I'm almost landing on my toes, but it's really just my midfoot. And people are so used to heel striking first that it just looks weird. It almost looks like I'm like floating or bouncing. but that's just what has always been comfortable for me. So what you can do and what you can think about when you're running is every time, well, you can first think of taking smaller steps. You don't want to be reaching out and taking this huge stride, because that's not going to be super efficient for very long. So take smaller steps and think about every time your foot lands on the ground, you want to pick it up as fast as possible. So you're taking smaller, quicker steps, and you may be going at the exact same pace as you were when you were overstriding, but it's just that much more efficient, and it's going to feel really weird at first. Like if you're not used to this, it's going to feel bizarre, but when you adapt to it, it's just that much better for your joints and just everything. So that is number one. Number two, your body positioning. So you don't want to run completely hunched over, obviously, with your chin down, shoulders rolling forward. That's not going to be great. That's going to be really hard when it comes to breathing. You also don't want to run leaning backwards and letting your hips lead. You really want to, like, if you think about standing up tall before you even move, like stand up tall outside, lean forward so that your whole body like tips like this, and you're leaning forward so much that you have to catch yourself with your feet or you'll face plant. Like that's how you want to start your runs, and then keep that slight forward lean from your hips throughout the entire run. So it's a constant lean, but it's not hunched over, if that makes sense. That's going to be helpful to think about. And then the last one is your arm swing. So a lot of people tend to like do weird things with their arms, whether it's like letting them cross the midline of their body. Ideally, you want your arms to just move front to back. And when you think about running, you're almost going to think about brushing your pocket with your hand as you run. So just a few things to think about. But again, don't overthink it so much that it feels like you're doing a weird dance when you're out running. Like it's going to take time for you to look
like a robot on the road.
It's going to take time for you to make these changes if your form isn't super efficient, but just pick one thing to focus on at a time, and until it starts to feel a little bit better, then focus on something else. But again, if you go watch any marathon or any race, everybody's running different. Like nobody runs exactly the same, and that's the beauty of running. So just those are my top 3 tips with running. All right, next one. This is another one that comes up quite often. Are group lifting classes at the local gym worthwhile? What should they be supplemented with when they are 2 days a week and are full body?
Depends what that class look like.
It really depends.
If you're doing circuits with the same 10-pound dumbbells and, going around in that circle, then that's probably more cardio than strength training. You're just moving your body, burning some calories.
You're not lifting at the right intensity.
If you're actually, benching and squatting and rowing and all those things with heavier weights that are actually challenging you to, at a minimum, 4 reps short of failure. But really, ideally, 1 or 2, and then pushing close to failure by the time you're on your last set, assuming adequate volume. Then, that's a couple days a week. It's fine. And supplement it if you want to do another total body day. Couple more total bodies days. There's so many different paths you can take with that. So it's very difficult to answer that generically, but I will say in your traditional boot camp circuit style, quote unquote, weightlifting class, that's really not strength training.
And listen, we used to teach classes like that.
Nothing wrong with them.
There's nothing wrong with them. Exercise in any form is great. If you're not doing anything at all, freaking do the class. But if you have specific goals and you want to specifically get stronger and more muscle mass and look more toned and lose some body fat, you're gonna have to be more specific with what you're doing in the gym. And a lot of those classes just, again, are not challenging you at the right intensity when it comes to weight. And even if you can use heavier weights, those classes likely change every week too. So it's not like you're doing any sort of progressive overload week after week, unless it's really like this small gym atmosphere where you have a small group of people and the trainer's bringing you through different stations. Like that might be a little bit different. But when we're talking like straight up group classes at the gym, probably not going to be the most ideal way of building muscle mass and achieving those more specific goals.
And to be clear, could you literally do 30, 40, 50 reps and see body composition improvements? You could, if you're actually getting to, 1 rep short of failure, not cardiovascular failure, not like gassed, but like your muscle could not do another rep. So that's where it gets really iffy and difficult to say, excuse me, to say you are making the most efficient changes in a setting like that. But again, if you are in that smaller class and it is more intentional as far as heavier weight, compound lifts, utilizing all the normal things you would see in a typical training program, resistance training regimen, then yeah, it could work. But for most people, for probably 90% of the classes out there, it's not the case.
Next question. When I'm lifting at a true RPE of 8, like I for sure could only do 2 more reps before muscle failure, I find myself needing a lot more rest between sets, maybe like 2-ish minutes, and especially towards the end of the workouts, mostly on lower body days. Is this normal, or should I be decreasing weight I'm using here so that I have more stable energy levels through the entire lift?
No, don't scale back weight.
It's
not done.
I'm not done. I struggle to find the balance in pushing myself hard enough and not destroying myself so much that I'm exhausted the rest of the day. I used to do CrossFit and I would be 100% dead after every workout. So maybe that's why I have a hard time knowing what truly is working hard enough and what it's like to call it in. Any advice or input would be appreciated.
So with the intensity level, it sounds like you've got the right intensity level. You may have too much volume. So your CNS is going to be taxed if you're overstressing overall volume. So that might be something to scale back. That's something I struggled with for a long time. I was 6 days a week, 20-ish sets per body part. So, you can obviously do a ton and really wreck yourself for the following day. And then if your following workouts are going to be trashed. So I would play with potentially scaling training days back, potentially scaling volume back. I've gone from 6 days a week, 20 to 25 sets per body part, down to 4 days a week, 6 sets per body part. And I'm seeing my most efficient progress, not only performance-wise, because I'm going to that intensity level every set, 1 rep short, and then finishing like at failure. But also I'm just recovering better because overall volume is down. So cumulative fatigue is significantly less. And that's where, there's more coming out now where deloads really aren't necessary. If you go through a deload and then you come back, you're not resensitizing your body. All you're doing is reducing cumulative fatigue. So if you notice a huge improvement your first week back, you're probably doing too much volume. So you could be doing more consistently by doing less.
Yeah, more is not always better when it comes to strength training and how many exercises you're doing or how many sets are in your workout. I think that's another thing a lot of people get caught up on is, oh, I need to do more, especially the people coming from things like those group classes and the boot camps and all that stuff. Like they come from that to something like our app programming, and it's like, oh, I just don't feel like this is enough. Well, number one, you're probably not lifting at the right intensity. You're not lifting to 2 reps short of failure. And number two, this is a different, like that really is, like you said, it is more cardio based. And our goal here is not to get your heart rate up, and that's the only goal of strength training. Like our goal here is to make progress week after week and get you stronger. So it's not going to be that like burst of like, oh, I'm so tired after this workout. You should feel good after when you're done. But to answer the first part of this question about rest time, I don't think it's an issue if you need to take more, maybe 2 minutes between sets if you are pushing at the right intensity. So don't worry about that.
Unless you really need to be time efficient. If you've got limited time, then that's going to be a struggle. So one point on top of that, which is kind of the inverse of what I just talked about, but take a look at your cardio as well. Like, are you doing cardio? Are you gassed from these sets? Another thing you can consider, everything else you just talked about, and this on top of that, is how many reps are you doing? Is it 12? Is it 15? Can you scale that back? So you can really crush it performance and aesthetic wise in a 4 to 8 rep range.
Well, this is an app member, so she's probably
following one of ours
programs.
Yeah. So what are build reps do you cycle through?
I cycle through. Typically, they're in that 8 to 12 rep range. Sometimes we'll go lower reps for a couple exercises. Sometimes we'll go into that 15 rep range, although I don't really like doing that myself, so I don't program that often. But we're typically in the 6 to 12 area.
And for those who are in Physique and Physique Plus, and again, a lot of these concepts are giving you guys what you want and what I used to like, as far as more volume, as far as more training days. I would cycle through, as I program these, typically 6 to 15 reps. And I wouldn't always go to 15. Sometimes it would be like 6, 8, or 6, 10, 12, as far as 3-month increments. So month 1, month 2, month 3. What is coming out in September? Evolve Hybrid, our new program. Everyone's been waiting for. Everyone's been asking about.
We announced the name yet, have we?
I think we
didn't name it. We said what was coming.
We said Evolve. Now it's Evolve Hybrid, because we're also going to include some additional things within that program, and cardio running will be part of that. If you guys want to utilize that, you can just do the program. But what I've been doing for the last 4 or 6 months has been this scaled back volume, much higher intensity. I'm keeping it in the lower rep ranges and not necessarily cycling through those rep ranges each month. We'll climb up a little bit, we'll come back a little bit, but I might have a couple months in a row where it is 6 to 8 reps for that range. And again, that's keeping cumulative fatigue down. The higher we get in that rep range, you're not necessarily creating these different changes within your muscle. You're not targeting different muscle fibers, type 1, type 2. You're going to be crushing them both. It's really, really important to make sure your intensity level is up. So that's what we're really focusing on in these new programs. So to keep overall fatigue down, training days are less. It's a 4-day per week program. Overall volume is less. It's going to be 6 sets per body part. When we might climb that a little bit, but for the most part, it'll be 1 exercise, 3 sets, upper lower split. And you're going to have a lot more energy. You're not going to come out of this feeling like garbage. Like, you are going to go into it knowing this is going to be a very efficient workout. So you are going to bust your ass in it in a very efficient amount of time. I'm going to talk you guys through how you can superset or tri-set certain things to really get it down. Because when I'm busy, I'm completing these workouts in 20 minutes. If I can take my time between sets, fully recovered, not worry about doing supersets, they might take 30, 40 minutes if I'm really taking my time through it. But if I need to blast, I can get a kick-ass workout in 20 minutes by supersetting them the right way. So I'm not saying go through everything as a big circuit, but utilizing chest and back as a superset, biceps and triceps as a superset. Maybe go with a tricep, bis, tris, traps, for example. So one isn't fatiguing the next. So just being really efficient with it. So long story short, prioritizing the right things the right way within the program, and making sure variables are set up in a way so we are minimizing fatigue while maximizing progress.
All right, we're hopping over to the nutrition side for a second here. This question says, I'm having difficulty sticking to a deficit. After spending a few years in surplus/maintenance, I wanted to go into a deficit. Only about 300 calories, so not too big, but I'm so used to eating my usual amounts of food and eating when I'm hungry. Obviously, you're going to be a bit hungry in a deficit, but whenever I get that feeling, I immediately feel like I need to eat something, making it really hard to adhere to the deficit and achieve my goals. Any mindset help would be great. My favorite piece of advice here when it comes to eating in a deficit, because the truth, that's very true. You're going to be hungry in a deficit. Like, that's just part of the process. You're eating less than your body needs to maintain. So hunger is a byproduct of that. Hunger is also not an emergency, right? So it used to be, like, when we think back to when we were
Speak for yourself.
We think back to when we were cavemen and needed.
You think back to when you were a caveman?
Thinking back, not when I was a caveman.
That's what you said.
When we had to hunt and gather our food, when we got that ping of hunger, it was like, okay, you need to start making the trek of however many miles you're traveling on foot to go find something to eat. We obviously do not live in that day and age anymore. It's very easy to get food. We can walk to the fridge. We can press a button on our phone and it arrives in our door in 10 minutes. So you have to remind yourself that that first inkling of hunger is not an emergency, and you don't have to immediately act on it. It's okay to sit with that for a little bit and be like, just notice it. Like, oh, I'm a little bit hungry. I'll be okay. I'm going to survive. So that's number one. On the other side of it, what you're eating also matters. I think sometimes when we get deep into maintenance and even eating in a surplus for years, you have that flexibility. And a lot of people tend to, even if you're still eating a lot of whole food and nutrient dense sources, there are things that you're eating that probably aren't super nutrient dense. You have more wiggle room, right? So coming out of that can be hard because you do have to kind of be picky about the types of foods that you're eating. And you at times will have to pick more of the higher volume, more nutrient dense foods. So more of the fruits and the veggies versus the cereals and the other things that you like to enjoy. So just one example. But, food volume matters. Making sure you're hydrated, making sure you're hitting your protein intake to keep satiety high, all impact it. But I would say just getting out of that mindset of like, I always have to act on my hunger immediately is going to be the most helpful piece of advice.
For sure. And I'll even take it to a controversial level. Well, I'll scale back first. Just getting comfortable being uncomfortable in that same kind of concept, and, sitting with that hunger and normalizing that, because you really haven't been hungry for the last couple of years if you've been in maintenance / surplus. But to go to a controversial level, you really want to expedite that process. Do a 24-hour fast. Like,
I would not ever do that.
I know you're not going to do that.
Never would catch me doing any kind
of
fast.
It's not gonna hurt anything.
You've done it.
I've done it a couple times.
Well, you've done it forcefully for like before you have your procedures, right?
For surgery, when I have to do it anyway, I'm like, let me just extend this to a 24-hour fast, or we'll go a little beyond that. When I was really struggling with energy and trying all the things, I did a couple not longer term, but a little over, maybe a day and a half for that fast. So maybe it was 30 hours or close to 36 hours, nothing crazy. But there are also times when I kind of crave it now at this point. And I do not fast often. Like if I have surgery twice a year, I might fast for one of those to the 24-hour mark. And then if I'm sometimes my body will just be like, hey, we've been having some processed shit for a while. I'm feeling a little shitty. Let's cut everything out for 24 hours. Let's totally rest and save that digest energy. I'm weird like that.
Apparently, I married a psychopath.
I am weird like that. I am very in tune with my body. Like when my body doesn't like something,
you're also not like a huge foodie. Like there are certain things you love when it comes to food, but like you could live without it. I feel like.
No, I do enjoy eating.
I know you enjoy eating, but like you're not like a foodie. Like
I don't know what you're saying.
Think of my dad who lives for food.
Nobody is a foodie to your dad's level.
But like you have, even like when this goes back to like when we first met and we were just eating very bland and like the super clean.
That's because I hated eating.
I know, but like I just don't. Horrible. You're not like a foodie guy. You're a coffee guy. You're
I love
a steak guy.
I love coffee. I love the process. Now, like I love the ritual of making coffee. I love the ritual of making steak. You have your favorites,
I said, but like.
I don't know where you're going, but there are times when I don't know why this thing's giving me technical difficulties here. There are times when my body's like, yeah, let's just not eat for 24 hours, and I'll do it. And that might be an additional time a year. So maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I'll do 24 hours just to do it. But what I was kind of getting back to, you said mindset hacks. You want to push it, do 24-hour fast, water only, and then learn to live with that feeling.
Yeah. It's a struggle transitioning from
24-hour boot camp,
a long period of maintenance and a surplus to a cut, but you can do it. And it really is like sitting with that discomfort more than anything else. All right. Favorite reads for mindset and meditation info. This is your alley here. Can you
all
think
things
of like
Buddhist, all things Thich Nhat Hanh. He's an author. He's a monk. One of the leading Zen, I don't know if educator is the right word, but bring a lot of that knowledge to us over here on the Western side of things. Mm-hmm. So anything Thich Nhat Hanh by him, that's where I really started it. My favorites. I don't know. I think I've read 6 or 7 of his books at this point. So
you liked Think Like a Monk too, didn't you? Jay Shetty?
That was all right. I didn't mind that.
That was
one.
Like an easier read.
It was more, if you want to start more mainstream, jump in with some Jay Shetty. Think Like a Monk was a good one for sure. That'll get you intrigued by the whole concept, but you really got to dive into the Buddhist readings. And again, I'll just say anything Thich Nhat Hanh is what you want to dive into as far as learning about mindfulness and learning about, the just focusing on your breath and the importance of mindfulness, so living in the present moment. And I haven't stumbled across a book that's fantastic on educating you to meditate. Like you kind of take it down the path you want to take it.
Meditation is like more of a practice.
It's a practice. It's a personal journey. There's personal preferences, different ways you can do it. Dan Harris, what was the app that he had?
Oh, Waking Up.
Waking Up app is one that I use. They have an intro to meditation. We have an intro to meditation that I guide you through in the SDE Method app. So if you guys haven't jumped into the meditation ones, it's nothing crazy. I kind of walk you through concepts, and a lot of those have just some basic sounds to take you through the 10 minutes, because a lot of times that's much easier than focusing on your breath for the 10 minutes. But now I scale all the way back, so I use those things to learn about it, to practice it, to get into the routine, and now I do it straight off, just focusing on my breath. You can do body scans, you can just focus on your breath, and it's not just let me tune everything out. Like, you're aware of everything around you, so you can meditate in a construction zone. You're just trying to limit your thoughts, and the thoughts are going to keep coming, they're going to keep flowing, they're going to keep interrupting you. The point is to see it, acknowledge it, and just let it keep flowing. So we're not going to get lost in that thought. We're going to come back to that present moment. We simply, the practice is, you're in a good spot for maybe 5 or 10 seconds. A thought comes in, you're aware of it, and you let it go. That's the practice. That's meditation. And that's how you get better at centering yourself and living in the present moment, cultivating mindfulness. So again, Think Like a Monk was a good one to get started, to kind of wet your lips. I don't even know what that's saying.
I don't know what you were going.
Wet your palate, wet your.
Let's just not. It just sounds wrong now.
That's gonna bug me. To dip your toes in.
Feet wet?
There's another one. Wet your lips, maybe.
No, I don't think that's right. Anyway,
get your feet wet with the Think Like a Monk, and then literally you get a dozen books by Thich Nhat Hanh and just take it down a whole bunch of avenues from there. So that one. There's another one with the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
I don't know.
I think that was The Art of Happiness, or
sounds right.
Something along those lines. There's an author who follows those two around, and that was a good read. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but it's interesting. Yeah, start there. Thich Nhat Hanh, #1 recommendation.
All right, we got 2 more. This may be more of a complaint versus a question, but I hope I'm not the only one struggling with this. I have a hard time pushing my muscles to RPE 8 because my joints start hurting first, particularly my knees in lower body movements. Is there anything I can do to improve joint health, stability, mobility? This is tough, I feel like, because I kind of want to see how you're moving, because if you're in pain joint-wise, something's probably off form-wise, I would suspect. That would be my first area to focus on, is really focusing on your form over trying to push the weight harder. Like, yeah, we want to make sure we're training at the right intensity, but you want form to be good at that right intensity, if that makes sense. So,
but also focusing on your weighted mobility routines to improve your range of motion to go through. And that's something I struggle with too. And
honestly, when it comes to joint health, like, the best thing you can do for joint health is strength training. So just being consistent with your strength training and making sure that form is optimal, you're making that progress, you're focusing on range of motion, everything that you're probably doing because you're doing the app. But
not necessarily. If someone's going through a limited range of motion, they might think they're still doing movement. But if you aren't, that's going to lead to more joint pain. If you're not going through that full range, you're really shortening those muscles. You're not getting that full ROM to practice improving your mobility overall. So if you're in that situation, lessen the weight, worry less about RPE until you have full range of motion at optimal form. Mm-hmm. So you're more using this as a mobility routine than necessarily resistance training progression.
Yeah, mobility, a lot of people think mobility is like stretching and like just flexibility, but truly improving your mobility is strengthening those end ranges of motion. So we want to be strong throughout the entire range of motion, not just at where we feel comfortable. So how you get there is by adding weight and doing it under weight. Optimally. So really focusing on dialing in your form and full range of motion, I would say, are the top 2 things that I would say to do there.
There was probably an entire month where I took every lower body day to an RPE of 5 specifically to optimize my form and go through full range of motion rather than try to push through it. So I would use everything and just say, this is me. I'm stretching today. I'm stretching my lower body.
If you don't have a coach, if you're using the app, film yourself. And then that way you can go back and watch it. Like, even not being a trainer and a professional, you can tell when you're at full range of motion or not. So by just going by feel and thinking about it without actually seeing what you're doing is going to be so much harder. Like, the number 1 tip we have for like all of our training clients, we really suggest them to send in training videos for form checks to their coaches, because even if you think your form is perfect, there's always something we can improve upon. So if you just get in the habit of filming yourself on these movements and analyzing it afterwards, you're going to see things that you likely would not just be able to feel it out while you're doing it. So
you can't go by feel until you feel what an optimal movement pattern feels like.
And you don't know what that is until you see what you're doing. All right, last one, injuries, personal experiences, tips with how to cope mentally before competition/race. I think this client has a race coming up and said she was injured or something. Injuries is such a broad topic, so it's really hard for us to give you specific advice here. But if it's like just kind of a nagging thing that comes and goes, making sure recovery is optimal, you're fueling efficiently, you're resting, maybe you look into some type of, it depends on what it is and what you're doing, but the cold plunges could be helpful in certain situations. Heat could be helpful in certain situations. Range of motion, mobility work, all of those things are helpful, but it really comes down to what you're dealing with. So if it is something more serious, then I would suggest maybe not racing. If it's like truly something that's going to make things worse, you don't want to put yourself in a worse position. And at the very least, go see a PT. Go see a PT who's familiar with lifting, get assessed, get some exercises they can give you specifically to improve whatever you're dealing with, and it will get better from there. But again, hard for us to be specific with just injury is such a broad topic. But personal experiences, I, knock on wood, have not been injured too much in my 10 years of training. I think the one time I went through something a little more frustrating was when I had that SI pain when I was doing powerlifting, and I had to get some dry needling. I saw a PT, it was super helpful, got me to competition day pain-free. That was really the only thing though. I don't think you've really been injured either.
Not since baseball. Played baseball with one hand for 3 weeks. Got in a fight, dislocated my wrist, didn't know it, and then I saw PT and he literally grabbed my wrist, flicked it, and popped whatever was out of place back into place, and I could use my hand again.
So moral of the story, go see a PT.
Get really good at dealing with pain.
All right, you guys, that wraps up this week's Q&A. Hopefully it was helpful. Remember, you can submit questions. These were all from our Facebook group this week. We had a ton. So next week we'll do any that you want to submit anonymously if we haven't touched on those yet. So go to the show notes. There's a link there. You can submit questions. We have no idea who is submitting what, so just go for it. Don't be embarrassed.
And remember, 3-episode rule. If you are still listening beyond 3 episodes, you've probably gotten some value. Someone else is going to get value from this as well. So just quick 5-star tap. Share us on social. Tag us. Leave a blurb in the review if you want to. We love you. We appreciate you. We're enjoying these Q&As. I hope you are too. Where can they find you?
I'm at Alessandra Skutnik.
I'm at Josh Skutnik.
Everything else is linked in the show notes.